we're continuing a series we started last week in what is called the Gospel of Mark. Gospels are these stories about Jesus written by different authors in the Bible, and they're written by the first followers of Jesus. And so I kind of introduced that a little bit in the last week's series, where I talked about who is John Mark and why did he write this, and how does Peter, one of the disciples of Jesus, how did he help inform and write this gospel, and all the cadence and structure of it. Like, it's very fast-paced. It's half the length of any other gospel we have in the Bible, and so it's got a lot going on. It's kind of like the gospel for ADHD people, which is amazing because I am ADHD 100%, and so I'm like, yeah, this is amazing, all this pace and stuff. And so last week we were introduced to John the Baptist and who he is, and also we were introduced to Jesus and who Jesus is and what people believed about Jesus in the first century, and why we're supposed to believe that he's not just some guy, he's not just a prophet, he's not just a moral teacher, but that the scriptures, the Bible, teaches us that he is the Son of God and he's the Savior of the world, this word Messiah. And what does that mean? And can we actually believe that? Like, are we taking the Bible just because it says it, we're supposed to believe it, or is there a reason behind that, right? And so that was last week. Don't have a lot of time to talk about that. So this week, we're entering into what I say is kind of like, this is when Mark kind of amplifies the intensity of the stories. We're 16 verses in already, and all of a sudden, things are going to get crazy. Like, this is going to be a wild ride for today. Honestly, for the next 9 months that we're in this series, every chapter has like so much going on. And you kind of can't take little sections at a time, because that's not really how Mark wrote the gospel. Like, he wrote it for us to read in larger chunks so that way we understand the flow and the narrative. And so what we're going to study today is going to feel super fast-paced. The ultimate goal of the text this morning is to teach us about the nearness of Jesus, and that he wants to enter into all of our lives, no matter the shame or the guilt or the confusion or the ostracization that we feel, but that Jesus walks into our situation and he steps into our space and he brings healing. That's what we're going to see, but the way that we're going to get there is kind of crazy. The best analogy I've got for kind of how to set you guys up for what the next 30 verses are going to be like is when I was in 7th grade, I was growing up in Colorado, and in the Denver area downtown, there is a Six Flags called Elitch Gardens. And Six Flags, if you guys don't know, that's like a roller coaster theme park craziness. We have one deep in the valley. And in 7th grade, it was kind of notorious that if you went to Elitch's, it was a big deal because there was one specific roller coaster called the Mindy Racer. And it was amazing, actually, all the marketing that they had, because they'd hand out like these little pamphlets and they'd give them to like kids in elementary school. And they were like, hey, kids, tell your parents you want to go to Elitch's this summer, right? And it was like, okay, that's cool. And my dad ended up, we booked a trip to it. I'll talk about that in a second. But on the pamphlets, it was hilarious. The way that they marketed the Mindy Racer roller coaster was like almost like a cartoony design of like a bunch of kids like on the roller coaster. And this is one of those roller coasters that, like your feet dangle, and you got to get locked in. And so they kind of visually made it look like if you got on this roller coaster, one, it would go so fast, it literally like erased your memory. Like, you could see like people's like a memory, like whoo, it was like in a cartoony thing. And then also it looked as if some people's legs were so far back that it would like break them off. And this was kind of like their marketing scheme of like, let's get these people to think, and it's mainly for kids, right? And so in 7th grade, I see that and I'm like, oh man, the Mindy Racer, like, and that was when Men in Black was a big thing too. And if you guys remember that, they like press the button, it's like, boop, and it like, no, you're blank stares. Wow, okay, Men in Black, Will Smith, you press the button, it wipes your memory. Okay, uncultured humans, whatever, all right, we'll work with that. Anyways, so I'm in 7th grade and I'm thinking this is gonna be the greatest thing ever. And I also have to put on a front because I've got an older brother and I've also got a dad that loves to torment me like most, dads do with little boys. And I was like, man, if this is real, like if this is the type of roller coaster that wipes your memory and might break your legs off, I gotta be awesome. Like, I gotta step up to the plate, I gotta be a cool boy, So my dad books us the trip, we go to Denver, we go to the thing, and we pay for the tickets, we walk in, and I'm like walking around like, I've got this. Like, there's nothing that's gonna freak me out. There's no way I'm gonna be afraid of this thing. And my brother's like, he had done a school trip to it at one point, and so he'd already done the mind eraser. So he's like, bro, I didn't lose my memory. You better not, those kinds of things. So we're going, and we get to the line, right? And we didn't pay for the fast pass, and there are hundreds of people in line. And all I hear, because the roller coaster does this like flipperooski move around, and then as you're in the line, its lowest point like runs right next to all the people in line, right? And it's a drop, and it's upside down. So all you hear is people screaming like bloody murder as they pass you, and doing that, right? So my 7th grade brain is like, oh no, and I'm like, Dad, do you there's no way that they wipe your memory? And he's like, I don't know, bro. Maybe they wipe your memory. I don't know. And I was like, no, wait, no, Dad. And I was like, no, but they're definitely not gonna break your legs, right? And he's like, and if you had a dad like this, so I'm this way to my own children, by the way. I got 2 boys, and I regularly torment them, in the most dad-like ways, right? I've got this junker beat up minivan. I used to have an old Ford, and we have the caution button, the triangle, the red button thing, right? And it's it sends your things. For years, I taught my kids that if I pressed that button, our little minivan would turn into a rocket ship, But I didn't have an approved license to fly a rocket ship. And I would be like, boys, we're about to take off. No, Dad, no. And I was like, I can't do, we're gonna crash. Right, so this is what dads do, okay? And if you didn't have a dad like that, I feel so bad, because being tormented when you're a child is hilarious and later. And then you pay for a lot of counseling to fix all that too. But So anyways, okay, so we're at the Eliches. By the way, this has something to do with the Gospel of Mark. I will connect it, I promise, okay? So we're in the line. I'm freaking out. I'm like, my mind's gonna be erased and my legs are gonna break off. My dad is not helping. My brother keeps telling me it's going to happen. So I'm like, this is horrible. So I start weeping and screaming at the top of my lungs. I'm like, somebody please save me. And I start looking at all of the other people in the line, because they, it does this. So there's just rows of human beings. And I start looking at them and I'm like, please save me. I'm screaming at a stranger, and I'm yelling, please, I don't want to die. I don't want to lose my and imagine that for just a minute. Imagine that you're at Disneyland, and there's a little, 8-year-old, and that 8-year-old is weeping at the top of their lungs, and they're screaming, I don't want to die. And their dad and brother are just laughing, and they're looking at you for help. That's awkward, right? You're like, I don't know what's going on. So what ended up happening, it scarred me for life, is that everybody just started laughing in the line, at me, because this kid thinks he's gonna die, So we do the thing. 45 minutes later, we get up to the top. It's even worse, because then, you're getting locked in, and your legs are dangling. And of course, I get the one seat that doesn't get super tight, it's and it's got this space. And I'm like, oh no. So I literally start shaking. I'm freaking out. I'm doing all these things. And this boy, I need to call him a boy because he probably was only 16 years old. This young man who's doing the roller coaster thing and getting people ready, he walks up to me and he's like, hey, bro, calm down. Because and I was like, okay. So I'm calm and I'm doing my thing. And also, by the way, my brother made me go first. We were in the front. We didn't get to be in the back, right? Because this is what you have to do. You gotta prove your manhood as a 7th grader, right? So we're up in the front, clicks us in. He's like, you need to calm down. And I was like, no, I can't calm down. He's like, first, you're not gonna die. And I was like, good to know that. So I was afraid. And he goes, but you're gonna have the best and wildest ride of your life. And immediately, my brain was like, this is gonna be fun. I'm not gonna die, but this is gonna be crazy, right? And you're like, how on earth does this apply at all to the Gospel of Mark, Josh, right? That's a great question, and I'm so glad that you asked it. It applies kinda, in the sense that when we get into the text we're getting into today, the invitation we're gonna see, Jesus, right after verse 15, he begins to invite new people to start following him. They're called his disciples. And this is where you got introduced to Peter and Andrew and James and John, the original disciples. Jesus walks up to them, and right away he says, I want you to follow me. And they follow him. They literally say yes. And what that meant was they would have to quit their jobs. They were fishermen. They had to stop doing that. They had to stop providing for their families. They had to go to their wives and be like, hey, I'm following this random rabbi who asked me to follow him, and people think he's a savior. I'm not so sure. But Jesus says, I want you to follow me. And in a sense, what he's asking them to enter into is this wild, crazy roller coaster experience that will not, it's not gonna kill them. They're gonna think it's pretty insane, but it's an invitation to something that will change them. Like, it's life-altering, amazing. They don't quite know it, but that's the invitation of Jesus. So he says, follow me. And if you have your physical Bible or a digital Bible, you can look that up. Mark chapter 1, 15, 16, 17. Walks up to him and he says, I want you to follow me. So they start to follow him. And soon after they begin to follow him, the wild ride that is following Jesus really begins. And to be honest with you, the way that it begins is absolutely crazy. If you are a Christian and you're in the room and you're like, I'm already following Jesus, I venture to guess that your first day following Jesus as a brand new Christian did not look like this. And if you're in the room and you're not a Christian and you're trying to figure this whole Jesus and church thing out, I can almost guarantee you that your first day following Jesus will not look like this day. It's crazy, it's amazing, and yet it's very intoxicating, and it's to the point where it's like, I kind of wish this was what every day with Jesus would look like and feel like. So look at this. We're going to start in verse 21, because this is kind of the nutso, wild, insane, am I going to die ride that Jesus invites his disciples into. Look at verse 21. We'll read through 28. They, being the very first followers of Jesus, they went to Capernaum, this little village, this little town, and they enter into the town they're there, but then all of a sudden the Sabbath comes up. Now, Mark is a really good storyteller, and he's trying to give us a hint that something significant is going to take place on a holy day. Because the Sabbath for the Jews, that's their Shabbat, that's Saturday, and there were a lot of regulations about what you could and could not do on the Sabbath. This was a highly religious environment, and the Pharisees and Sadducees of the day had very strong recommendations and demands of what you could not do, and if you broke any of those rules, then you were considered sinful, wrong, all these things, right? So Mark is setting the scene. Jesus just got baptized. Now he's filled with the Spirit of God. He calls his disciples. He said, the kingdom of God is now about to start showing up. And it's like, okay, what's going to go on? He walks into Capernaum. Sabbath comes. Jesus then enters into the synagogue, which would have been a local village kind of church like us, like a little church gathering. And really weirdly, he walks into the synagogue and he began to teach. Now, I need to stop for a second, and I want you to think about this, okay? This is, because you're just like, oh yeah, of course he began to teach. He's Jesus. No one knew who Jesus was at this time, guys. Nobody, only John the Baptist. And John the Baptist was like, oh my gosh, I can't touch your sandals, you're so holy, right? This means that Jesus tells these guys, I want you to follow me. And they're like, okay, we'll follow you. We don't know what we're doing, but we'll follow you. And then Jesus walks into a church. It's not his church. He's not the pastor of this church. He's not the Pharisee who oversees this. This is not his congregation. This is a totally different village. And it would be like if he just walked into the sanctuary right now and just made his way down the aisle and was like, oh, hold on, Joel, sorry, move out of the way for a second. And comes up and he grabs the microphone right there and just was like, Josh, get out of the way. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm so sorry. And then he just stands up here and just starts teaching. You guys have no idea who he is. He is not on our website as a staff member of the church, just some random guy who walked in with 4 random dudes who used to work in the ocean, which means that they're a bunch of homeless dudes from Venice, right? That's the thinking, okay? Go to Venice Beach right now, come back with 4 random people, and then give them a microphone. How do you think that's gonna go? It's gonna go exactly as you just thought. It's gonna be crazy, right? This is what Jesus does. Can we just acknowledge that? Don't read this as someone who grew up in the church, like, oh, this is normal Jesus. No, this is crazy. Walks up and he starts teaching. And the people in verse 22, something happens. Look at verse 22. The people, they were amazed at what he was teaching. It's like something else. Because he actually taught them with someone who had authority. The ancients, the first century religious leaders, they never taught what they thought. They never had personal opinions. It was always, well, so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that. And if you have a friend who does this, you know what it's like. They're always reading an article. You know, they've always researched something. And you know they didn't. Like my sons, all the time. They will make up the most nonsense things ever. And then one of my boys will always say, well, I researched it. And I'm like, you don't even have access to the internet, dude. How are you researching? And you don't even know where a library is. And it's like their way of saying, I made this up, I think, and I'm not really sure, whatever. So all the religious leaders back in the day would do this. They would just quote somebody. But Jesus shows up and he starts saying what he believes, and it's authority and it's authoritative, and he speaks as if he's God. And so that's kind of blown the people's minds away. He teaches with one who had authority, and it's not as the teachers of the law did. So, okay, crazy, a little bit, maybe a little weird, awkward social gathering, sure. But then things get really weird in verse 23. Look at verse 23. Just then, so as Jesus is teaching, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit. This guy literally has a demon residing in him, okay? In the middle of a church service. All of a sudden, he begins to cry out. What? Is anybody else weirded out by just that? 3 of you, okay? Guys, think about it. Jesus walks in, grabs a microphone. You're like, who's this guy? Oh, I kind of like what he's saying. And then all of a sudden, some dude in the middle of the sanctuary is just like, he starts freaking out, starts screaming because he's possessed, not just high, possessed. Like the evil spirit has got him. And it starts screaming out. Verse 24 says, what do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? So the spirit starts crying out on behalf of the man at Jesus, and then it gets so freaked out. It says, have you come to destroy us? Because I know that you are the Holy One of God. Okay, like just imagine this scene. This is like Harry Potter nonsense, right? This is crazy. This is like, what is going on? Jesus stands, starts preaching. Impure spirit starts declaring, are you going to destroy us because we know that you are from God himself? Guys, this is the stuff that none of us ever think is supposed to happen, ever. And imagine the disciples within 3 hours of being asked to quit their jobs and start following him. This is happening. Like when I became a Christian, I came up to the front of a local altar at a camp. I prayed a prayer that I was like, wow, I'm forgiven. And I went and had lunch. That's what I did after I became a follower of Jesus. And then a couple months later, I got baptized. I didn't see any of this stuff happen. So this is the disciples' kind of first interaction with Jesus being Jesus. It's like, okay, this is pretty crazy. So then Jesus acknowledges the spirit. Verse 25, he goes, be quiet. Again, it's still in a church service. Come out of him. So the impure spirit shook. So now the guy's having a seizure in the middle of service. So it shook violently. It comes out of him with a shriek. I don't know what a shriek, something, right? So this is all happening. Then verse 27, the people were all so amazed that they asked each other, what is this? A new teaching, but with authority? He even gives orders to the impure spirits and they obey him? News about him, notice this, guys, in verse 28. News about him began to spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee, which kind of makes sense, right? Like you come into this church service, this thing happens, this impure spirit gets delivered, this guy's teaching, you guys would literally leave. If this happened, you would literally leave. You would go to the farmer's market and you tell everybody at the farmer's market about what just happened. You'd be like, dude, this crazy church across the corner over there got some people filled with demons, is weird. That's what you would start talking about. And news would get out, right? So, again, I want us to take the perspective of the disciples this entire time. That's not what you thought you were signing up for. And after this, things get even more bizarre. We're not going to read it, but after this, in verses 29 on, the disciples, Peter specifically, realizes, wow, Jesus, I think, has got some supernatural ability that I didn't expect. And so Peter's mother-in-law, she's actually dying from it says she has an excruciating fever, which in the first century, if you had an elevated fever for a long period of time, in all likelihood, you were not going to live. They just didn't have the medical interventions that we had. And so she's dying, and we're told that Jesus walks into the house, and there's Peter, and there's his mother-in-law, right? And walks in, and he just touches her. Just a little boop, just a little touch. No craziness, no weirdness, no anything like that. Just touches his mother-in-law, and immediately she's healed. So you just said, I will follow you, Jesus. You just saw Jesus preach a sermon. You just saw him cast out a demon. And now, 30 minutes later, you went to his house, he went to your home, and he just instantaneously healed your mother-in-law. That's a little bit out of this world, and sure enough people actually get wind that this is happening, and they start hearing, oh my gosh, Jesus heals the sick, he raises the dead to life, he has capacity to do things that only God can do. This is why Jesus early on, in verse 15 and 16, this is why he says the kingdom of God is at hand, because every single thing he's doing right now, healing, delivering, restoring, they are all signs of God bringing his kingdom. This is what it means for signs and wonders to happen. It's not someone being a weirdo who's not like a televangelist and they do crazy weird things on TV. The kingdom of God is a place where there is no death, there is no demonic activity, there's no evil, there's no corruption, there's no sickness. God reigns in a perfect world of his kingdom. And so when Jesus says, I'm going to bring my kingdom, it means that all of those things then are going to be shown. They are signposts that the kingdom is now arriving. And so because of this, all these people get wind of this, and we're told that a whole village shows up. And they're there, and they want Jesus to heal the sick, they want him to cast out demons, and they want him to do it for every single person who needs it. So Mark tells us that in a 24-hour period, Jesus does all of these things, and then every single person from the entire evening until the next morning, every single person that needs to be healed and delivered, he does it. Could have been 1,000 people. 24 hours, guys, from when the disciples said, yes, I will leave my family, I will abandon my job, and I will follow this guy, to then they see miracles, they see healing, they see deliverance, they see Jesus teach with authority, they see him do a radical thing on Sabbath. That's roller coaster tycoon crazy stuff, guys. And I don't think any of us would say that that's what our first day looked like when we became Christians. Anybody? Anybody better in that story? I don't know, right? If you do, please let me know. I want to hang out with you more because that sounds like an intense time, right? So all of this is happening, and the culmination of this story isn't even what we just talked about and read. It's actually in the very next morning what happens. The big crescendo moment of where we really see how this applies to us is actually in verse 40 when we're introduced to a brand new character. It's the next day. So look at this in verse 40. A man with leprosy came to Jesus. Now, we're going to keep reading, but I want to give you some qualifiers here. First, leprosy is a horrific skin disease. There are leper colonies to this day in different areas of the world, usually third world countries. Debilitating, eats your body alive. And culturally, there were requirements for people who had leprosy, specifically in the first century Jewish context. If you had leprosy, you were no longer allowed to be touched ever. Because people thought that they could get that from touch, and actually it was equivalated with sinfulness and being cursed by God is what people thought. So as a leper, you were required to live in camps outside of where villages were. You had to be cast away. You were never allowed to approach a person because you then would deposit sin, is how they thought about it. And in fact, the only time that you could communicate with somebody, if you happened to be near somebody who had not experienced leprosy, you had to declare twice. This is Levitical law. You had to scream twice, I am unclean, I am unclean. So you had to announce your shame. You had to be isolated from society, and you had to regularly remind yourself and others that you were unworthy, that you were untouchable, that you were unloved, and that you were cursed. This is what it meant to have leprosy. In our day, we maybe don't have leprosy, but a lot of us have a spiritual leprosy. We believe that we're untouchable. We believe that we're unlovable. We believe that we're unwanted. We announce how broken we are regularly to people, and we like data dump on them how horrible we are because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy of how broken we are. This is very normal in our day, just a little different. And this man, he breaks the number one rule. He doesn't say I'm unclean. He doesn't warn Jesus, and in fact, he comes to Jesus. Jesus does not come to him. This man runs to Jesus, and he falls on his knees, and he begins to beg him. And he says to him, if you are willing, and I want you to notice this, he doesn't ask, can you make me clean? This man heard through the grapevine of all of these people getting healed. Somehow, word got to a leper colony that there's a mysterious man who might just be able to heal even the worst of diseases. And this man breaks out of the leper colony, finds where Jesus is, runs to him, and he says, if you are willing, if you have any desire to see me and to know me, if you care, you can clean me. You can, I know you can. I just wonder, are you willing? Guys, this is the kind of stuff that I think a lot of us wish that we could say to Jesus. I've been around in pastoral ministry long enough to meet enough people to know that the average person, you, me, anybody in this room, we all operate under this assumption that we're not so sure God is willing. We hope that he would be willing to clean us. We hope that he's willing to forgive us. We hope that maybe he's willing to see us, but because of the rap sheet of our sin and our life and our doubts and our anger and our all that, we all kind of operate under this assumption that we're not so sure. I don't really know if Jesus actually wants to blank. Most of you are unwilling to say that out loud, but almost every one of you thinks that. Behind closed doors, maybe just in your personal journal. And we think, man, I don't know. Maybe Jesus is willing. Maybe he's not. I don't know. I know he could do something. I do know that he could do something. But is he willing? And Mark continues to tell us a beautiful end to this story. Well, not really an end, but a culmination of it. Look at verse 41 and 42. Jesus was indignant. Does anybody know what that word is? Indignant? It means furious. It means livid, angry. Like to the point where his body is feeling the rage. And he's not mad at the guy. Like, I'm going to let you know right now, Jesus is not mad at this dude for showing up. He's not like, fine. No, that's not it. Jesus is so repulsed by the sickness. He is so angry that the system of religion that man was in caused him to think he was untouchable. I mean, if you're ever curious about the heart of Jesus, just look at what he does when he's around religious people, and he hates it. He always pushes. He's always trying to break a rule. He's always telling them that they're brood of vipers and they're whitewashed tombs because they keep people from experiencing God. And so it infuriates him. And regularly, he's also furious and he grieves with compassion whenever he sees someone sick or hurting or ill, because he knows that that's not what the world's supposed to be like. And so he sees this man, he runs up to him, he gets on his knees, he says, if you're willing, and Jesus is like, I can't even stand the fact that you think I'm not willing right now because of the stupid religion of our world. And he does this amazing thing. The man is kneeling, and Jesus touches him. He reached out his hand. Guys, this man had not been touched in probably years. And if you're thinking, well, no, lepers would probably touch each other, right? No. Ancient people, actually, we even think about this in our day and age today. Eastern mysticism actually teaches this. This is like energy healing stuff and chakra nonsense. It's all demonic, by the way. But there's a belief in our society that if you touch something that is wrong, if you've engaged in something that has sin or evil or negative to it, you kind of get more of that ick on you. And we think this, and this is how people thought back in the day. A leper who already thought that they were cursed by God and already thought that they were sinful, if they touched another leper, they believed that that would compound and they'd become even more sinful. If they touched anything, that thing would become sinful. And so lepers were not just like, oh, well, we'll give each other comfort. No, these were colonies of people who had not been touched. They had not been loved. The only thing that they said over and over again is how unworthy they were. And Jesus walks up to him, and before he says anything, he touches him. Already, that's the one thing every one of us needs, by the way. For Jesus to just finally see us and touch us, because no one else seems to. And he says, not just, I'm going to heal you. He says, I am willing. I want to do this. I so desperately cannot wait to heal you. So he touches the man. He says, I'm willing. And then he says, be clean. And Mark's favorite word in verse 42, immediately, instantaneously, the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. Okay, so I want to address something. Just because this is written in the Bible is not like all of a sudden we should be like, oh yeah, that happened. Because that's not critical thinking. In the first century when this was being written, even the Greeks and the Romans who read this for the first time, they would have been like, did that really happen? Like, was it instant? Like, why would Jesus do, like, does he, how can he do, like, there's a level of hesitation, right? I mean, maybe that's just me. Maybe I just think about this critically, but I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I do believe that the disciples thought it happened and that God could maybe do this, right? But it's like, you know, could he do it today? Would he do it today? Would he do it, this afternoon? Would he, I don't know. Like, these are big questions. These are things that I think every one of us want to think. We actually do think them, but then if we say them out loud, we think that we're not good enough Christians, right? We're like, oh, yeah, am I allowed, and all that stuff. And so you read something like this and you're like, I don't know, man. One of our board members at our church, his name is David Parker, amazing man. He's been around for a long time. He's in his 70s, and he tells a story that is pretty mind-blowing about this, actually. So in the 1986-ish year, there was a conference happening in Anaheim, just about an hour away from here. And it was a conference on teaching about how Jesus does the things that he did in the Bible. He still does that today. And this was like revolutionary. In the 80s, no one was thinking that. Like everybody was like, you just go to church and you button up and you look like you're like religious and then you go home. You don't ever have an expectation that God's gonna do the things that he did. That's Jesus, that's not us. So they're at this conference, and if you're like, Josh, are you making this up? I'm not. He's a board member at our church. Next time he preaches, ask him if this story's true. So he's in this conference, and he's in this huge building that sits like 4,000 people. It's a huge auditorium. And he's there, and he is just like many of us. And he's like, I don't know. Is God really doing this? Does he really heal the sick like this, And so he's there. He's at the conference. The teacher's teaching. It's kind of like a hoorah moment. Everybody's getting amped out of their mind. And he's in the very back of this stadium that sits 3, 4, 5,000 people. He's in the very back row, and he's like, I don't know. I want God to do that. I don't know. And so the speaker from the stage is like, hey, so we want to actually begin to pray for people to experience healing from God. We want to see a sign that God's kingdom is coming. And so they read this passage. And then they said, hey, there's somebody in the room, somebody out of 4,000 people, that has a skin disease all over their body, and it's just miserable. It's torturing you. And Jesus wants to heal you. This is a really bold thing to say, right, in a room of 5,000 people. And so David's in the back. He's like, well, I don't have a skin disease, so who is it? And he starts looking around, and they're like, just come on up to the front, whatever, do your thing. And or no, they actually said, go on and raise your hand. And he's like looking around. He's like, where's this person? Where's this person? All of a sudden, he looks over, and she's like 4 seats away, this other gal who is also sitting in the back, just nervous as all get out, and she's covered head to toe in a skin disease. And David's like, oh, that's her? Wow, that's gonna be cool. Maybe God's gonna do something. And so he's expecting that the person in the front is gonna say, God wants to heal you, come on down, and all the holy people in the front, we're gonna pray for you, right? This is like what most people usually think is gonna happen. Instead, the speaker in the front said, all right, great, hey, we see you in the back. So everybody who's just closest to you, everybody just go over there, and you're just gonna pray for her, and God's gonna heal her. And David's the only one. He's like, literally, they're in the back. There's no one else there, right? So he walks up to her, and he does what any of us would do. This is what I would do, at least. He starts like internally rehearsing his apology speech to her. Like, I know God usually doesn't heal. I'm so sorry. Like, God works together for the good of all. This stuff, right? Like when you pray for someone and nothing happens, you're like, I don't know what to do. So he's already like preemptively rehearsing, trying to be a good Christian because God's not going to do the thing, right? And so he goes up, he's like, okay, well, go ahead and close your eyes, and she puts your hands out, and he just, doesn't put his hand on her, but he's kind of has it hovering over, and he prays like the lamest prayer ever. He just goes, all right, Jesus, would you heal her? And then he's like, well, we're done. Like that's, And immediately, like an Etch-a-Sketch, where you kind of, you swipe it, and all of a sudden the Etch-a-Sketch kind of cleans up, From the top of her head to the bottom of her feet, he instantly saw her entire skin disease completely cleaned. She's sitting there, and she's got her eyes closed. We do this at the Vineyard here. We're like, close your eyes, we'll pray. And so she doesn't really know, but she kind of knows, and you can tell she's like getting like so excited because something just happened, right? And David is sitting there, and he's like, something just happened. This is crazy. And so she opens her eyes, and she realizes it's all gone. And she erupts with this like type of scream cry that he says it's as if her tears just like shot out. And he like had to dodge him like a pickleball ball, right? He was like, and like doing his thing. And fully cleaned, she then runs to the back area where there was a payphone. And she puts a quarter in, and she calls her mom, and she says, Mom, you wouldn't believe this, but Jesus healed me. And I tell you that story not because I think like, okay, today Jesus is gonna heal every skin disease. I'm not telling you that story. I'm telling you that story because when we see miracles like this happen in the Bible, and we hear stories of God doing it with normal people, a lot of us wonder, okay, but does Jesus actually see me? He saw them and he saw that person, but what about me? I don't have a skin disease, but I'm immeasurably depressed, or I'm broken, or I am not seen. I feel like I'm outcast. Does he see me? And does he show up to me? And what does he do? And the beautiful thing is that the story doesn't end. I'm going to end with this. This will be really quick. But the story doesn't actually end right there. He doesn't just heal the leper and then it's all done. There's a whole nother scene that takes place that shows us what Jesus does for every single one of us. And it's really beautiful. Look at verses 43 to 45. So Jesus, he sent him away at once, and he actually gave him a warning because the whole world wasn't ready. but it didn't matter. This guy was so excited. Gave him a whole warning. And he says, see that you don't tell anybody about this. Like, you got to keep it on the hush-hush for a little bit. So go, show yourself to the priest and offer the sacrifices that Moses has commanded, your cleansing. Basically, you got to go to the elite religious people of the day because then they'll let you back into society if they see that you're clean, as a testimony to them. Verse 45, instead, not listening to Jesus, this guy went out and he began to talk freely, spreading the news, telling everybody that Jesus healed him and that he's been redeemed, he's been restored, and he's getting entered back into society. And as a result, notice the language that gets used here, guys. As a result, Jesus could no longer enter a town openly, but instead, he had to stay outside in lonely places. Yet the people still came to him from everywhere. Mark is doing something very beautiful linguistically here. This is when he enters in as a creative writer more than just a biographical, historian. He's giving us a picture of the heart of Jesus right now. And the heart of Jesus is every one of us. Every single one of us has had a moment in life where we felt like we were on the outside, we were unloved, that we did not deserve. And the picture we're seeing is that Jesus, when we approach him and we say to him, are you willing? His response is not just to say, I'm willing. And his response is not just to clean us of the thing that maybe we need cleansed from in that moment, which could be a myriad of things that we need God to do. But the ultimate thing that he does for this leper is there's a great exchange that happens. The leper who had to live on the outside, the leper who had to declare that he was unclean, the leper who was no longer allowed to enter in any way, shape, or form, in that moment experiences healing and cleansing and wholeness. But ultimately what takes place is that Jesus himself then becomes the leper. Did you guys notice that? Think about it. Mark does not have to tell us that last verse. Like, look at it again. If you're like, I don't know what you're talking about, Josh, look at the very last verse. Verse 45 at the very, very end of the sentence here. Nieko, can you put it right back up for me real quick? Back verse. Look at this, guys. Jesus could no longer enter a town openly. Like, why are you telling us this, Mark? And he had to stay outside. Okay, he could have just said, Jesus just couldn't show up in cities, so he had to get a little base camp outside in the middle of nowhere. He'd be fine. He doesn't say that. He says he could not go to any of these places anymore, and he had to stay outside in lonely places, places of isolation, places that he did not deserve to be. Why? Because the replacement happened. The leper who was untouched, unlovable, unseeable, sick and sinful and disgusting, that person finally got to enter into society and declare and be free and be whole. And the replacement was Jesus had to take his place. Jesus had to go to the lonely place so that way the leper didn't have to go to the lonely place anymore. Guys, this is why this story is not just about some guy getting his skin cleaned and that if you've got a skin disease, now's your lucky day. This story is about how Jesus enters into every single place of your entire life where you have ever felt like you are on the outside and you are forgotten and you have been untouched and unloved in any way possible for your entire life. And this is the invitation of Jesus. He says, would you come to me? And we walk to him and we say, Jesus, if you're willing, you can. And he goes, I am so willing. And in that moment, he enters into the space that we used to be so that way we would have freedom. So wherever you're at this morning, whatever you're going through, whatever you're nervous about, whatever you feel so shameful for, you need to know that Jesus desperately wants to trade places with you. And he wants to bring you in so that way he can go out on your behalf. This is the whole point of the gospel. This is the whole point of Jesus' death. This is the whole point of him taking all the sins of the world upon himself to bring healing and wholeness to every single one of us. This is the gospel, and we see it in this story. This is the wild ride of following Jesus, friends. So I know I went long, but I really hope that you grasp this because I think Jesus wants to meet you just this way today. So let me pray for us. Band, you guys can come on up. And then we're going to respond in worship today.